Thomas, no sooner than we loaded up the tweets for August 17th, 2018, did POTUS tweet out 2 more tweets that we absolutely have to cover before we move into August 18th, 2018.
I'm ready, Betsy.
Okay. I'm going to read these together since it has the ... dots. And if any of you want to follow along, read the tweets, you can do that by clicking on the link in the description box under the YouTube video. Quote, Bruce Orr of DOJ is in legal jeopardy. It's astonishing that he's still employed. Bruce and Nellie Orr's bank account is getting fatter because of the dossier that they are both peddling. He doesn't disclose it under Fed regs. Using your federal office for personal financial gain is a federal gratuity statute violation, bribery statute violation, honest services violation, all major crimes because the DOJ is run by, in big capital letters, the word blank, Jeff Sessions, close quote, Greg Jarrett. And then Trump continues, so when does Mueller do what must be done? Probably never.
That's pretty funny. Yeah, probably never, because if he has his way, he won't do it until past 2020, because his job is to obstruct elections. And that's what he continues to do, Mr. Mueller, SS Herr Mueller. And by the way, it is an honor to attempt to read between the lines of a stable genius like Donald J. Trump.
Well, is that word blank? What is that? Is that the word feckless or absent or MIA? What does that blank mean?
I would agree with all of those, Betsy, and you don't want to get me started with what I'd put in there, because we're broadcasting and we're not supposed to use those words.
Well, technically we're YouTubing, not broadcasting.
Well, whatever tubing we're ever doing. I can't call him the names that he really is. Let's call him Benedict Arnold. That would be Jeff Benedict Arnold Sessions, or Jeff Rip Van Winkle Sessions, or Jeff Mr. Magoo Sessions, or lots of blanks. But what I liked is just that Jeff is a blank. He's an absolute blank, exactly as you put up on Truth News Headlines. Now, let's go back here. I like what Greg Jarrett says, and I'm glad he finally came to call it crimes. And let's just go over a little bit of what he's talking about here. With Bruce Orr, do not forget, who is Bruce Orr? I call him the linchpin, because he's the guy who was the bag man, the delivery boy for who? Loretta Lynch. Let's not forget that Bruce Orr was taking his direct superior's orders when he did all of these criminal things. So I call him the linchpin, as in Loretta Lynch pin. And then let's remember that he was also Kerry's man. Oh, he was Kerry's man. He made sure that 2,500 Iranians have come into this country that we're now seeing in the news being told that the sleeper cells are about to go off as a threat because we won't be extorted by Iran right now. So, that's really terrible.
And he's one of these DOJ SES members that's an attorney. He sits on some special council where he approves big awards for people. Isn't that correct?
That's where I'm going next
after. Oh, I'm so sorry.
I insult him by calling him the Truth Sessions boss, because Sessions hasn't done anything, because he's just a blank, and the SES members tell him what to do. And Bruce Orr is one of the highest SES members, as you pointed out. 500 of the top lawyers in the Department of Justice sit on the final review board for the SES. And when they say, Greg Jarrett says here, that he is enriching himself, yes, Bruce Orr sits on a committee, the final review board, that can give himself an award, presidential award, $35,000 award.
You sound like you're from the Ozarks. Himself.
It's
himself.
Himself's. Uh-huh. Yeah. Well, I am from the Ozarks, and I'm proud of it. I've been bit by ticks many a time. So let's remember also that the beautiful Nellie Orr probably received some of the $12 million that Mark Elias, through Perkins Coie, paid to Glenn Simpson's Fusion GPS, where Nellie quit working for the CIA and went over to work for Fusion that was being paid $12 million, and she did most of the work, even though Glenn Simpson's wife wants to brag that Glenn wrote most of the dossier. We know that's not true. Glenn's not very creative. So the beautiful Nellie Orr used her ham radio to tune in to hot news from Russia that she included in the Russian dossier. And I'm sure that she got paid more working for Fusion GPS than she was paid working for the CIA Open Source Works, which she was working for one day before she started working the next day over at Fusion GPS, which is an obstruction machine. It is an election rigging machine. It is a propaganda schmear machine. I don't have any nasty enough words for the Fusion GPS, but let's remember, when he uses the word here, as Greg Jarrett uses the word peddling, you said from the beginning, Betsy, that Christopher Steele was selling a copy of that dossier to anybody who'd buy it, and we made jokes about David Kramer bought a copy for McCain, and McCabe, of course, made copies of it and passed it out to everyone, which we now find out actually he did. So you were right about that. And his other man, his step-and-fetch-it man, Henry Kramer, took it straight...
Isn't that Kerner?
Kerner, sorry, Henry Kerner, Kerner. He took it straight to Dianne Feinstein's and Marco Rubio's and think
about now, Dianne Feinstein. She's got the Chinese spy with her for 20 years. But I have to ask you something. Bruce Orr is Asian. We see that in his pictures. Is there any remote possibility that he's in his position because of some Chinese connection himself? I mean, how does a guy like Bruce Orr, not because he's Asian, but just because he's kind of like, who is this guy? Where did he come from that he holds a position in the senior executive services where he's really telling Sessions what to do? And we know that the people in senior executive service don't have to do the same background checks that everybody else is. They can actually be foreigners that hold these positions. So who is Bruce Orr?
Well, that's a very, very good point. And just like Peter Strzok, they don't seem to be able to fire him. They demote him to a different office, but then he's the head of that office.
But you can't fire SES people.
That's the point.
Especially the head ones.
And especially if they were the star witnesses in Robert Mueller's special investigation. Not only was Peter Strzok the star witness, he was also the star investigator who had astounding powers to write national security letters, to classify and declassify, to astounding powers that literally only the president has, and that's because he was working in counterintelligence, and at that level it's supposed to be outside of the domestic bounds of the United States. It's supposed to be working against our enemies, not against us. So Christopher Steele was peddling along with, and I like it because it's a kind of a funny joke, Bruce Orr, because how did Bruce Orr enrich himself? By the ways we just mentioned. Plus, there was all this money flowing to his wife. And let's remember, John Brennan is the head of the CIA, where beautiful Nellie Orr worked in Open Source Works, and then from one day to the next went to work for Fusion. But that didn't bother John Brennan because he was part of the whole thing too. He knew everything that Fusion was doing because he knew full well that the Fusion dossier through Christopher Steele, the dirty dossier, was in fact used to attempt to get a FISA warrant early on to go after Carter Page and the Trump team in the spring, long before he attempted to get his international FISA warrant, which he got, I believe. Nobody really knows. No one's addressing that one, to do his counterintelligence work against Trump through George Papadopoulos, who he didn't even interview until 1 year later. 1 year, the investigation went on for 1 year before they actually interviewed him. They spoke with him 6 months into it, but he wasn't interviewed. And then they pick him up at the airport like he's a criminal a year after the investigation, after they've been wiretapping, yes, surveilling, wiretapping, whatever you want to call it, every member of the Trump team because of George Papadopoulos, because of John Brennan. Because why? Christopher Steele was out there peddling that beautiful dossier. And so when we say what needs to happen is blank Sessions needs to go away. We won't notice if you're not there, Jeff, because most of the things you've done have been moving us back into the Stone Ages.
You're a disgrace, and especially to the good people of Alabama.
Absolutely.
Who believed in you. So many Americans have believed in you. We've watched them in the comment boxes. You have disgraced us all.
Absolutely. And the investigators should now be investigated. And I like to call the investigators in the Robert Mueller team the swamp gators, because that's all they are. They're just swamp creatures who are going out there chomping at anything they can because they never had a crime. They were never duly vested. And what really needs to happen, because, at the end, tag note here by Trump, so when does Mueller do what must be done? What must be done is to tell the truth that he is completely innocent. Trump is completely innocent. So what is he insinuating? Shut her down and lock him up and go after those investigators in a new investigation to investigate the investigators.
Well, then that's the reason Mueller isn't going to stop, because he doesn't want to stop. They're going to start looking at him, and it's fair game. I think we need to go all the way back to 9/11 when we look at Robert Mueller.
Absolutely.
All right. Now, continuing on, this next tweet is really 3, but I will keep them broken for you, okay? First one. Social media is totally discriminating against Republican conservative voices, speaking loudly and clearly for the Trump administration. We won't let that happen. They are closing down the opinions of many people on the right while at the same time doing nothing to others.
The Trump effect, Trump derangement syndrome. They went so crazy that they colluded with hundreds of newspapers to make sure that they would be colluding exactly along the way that mainstream media colludes through Avid and through ISIS management.
But he's talking about social media here.
I know he is. And what he's really saying is that there is the discrimination against the right he's not going to stand for. In other words, they've broken the law. There is a thing called discrimination. And this is campaign finance crimes, because these are campaign donations. When MSM, the mainstream media, says that they are 100% for positively Hillary, as they were, and they literally state that, that is in fact a donation to her campaign. It was an unclaimed donation, so both sides are guilty. And what is happening now, because there's clear discrimination against the Republican candidates, both on Twitter, on all over the place, we see it in the social media. What is happening? This is breaking the law. They have now dipped down, and they're going to get charged with the Communications Decency Act, Section 230. They should probably go ahead and get ready. And they should get their lawyers ready, because this is sheer discrimination, and there's no way around it. And other things that Trump is indicating here is that it doesn't matter whether you want to say it was an AI or it was a bot or it was whatever. You're a corporation that states that you allow a platform for free speech. So what you've really done is broken another law where you have advertised one thing and delivered the opposite. And not only did you deliver the opposite, but you delivered it in a discriminatory way. So they are setting themselves up for being squished by Trump. And he's giving them warnings. They could back off, but as you'll hear in the next...
But they can't, because they were originally set up to wind up being the surveillance technologies that they are. So they would herd people all onto one platform for speech, and then when they were ready to shut it down, they would. Because you see, these people stole their ability to do what they do from Leader Technologies. And it's like a kid who steals his dad's car, and is driving. He's 11 years old. He didn't know what he's doing. And that's what's happened to these people. They really don't know how to drive the internet. Well, patriots down here, where we are, folks, we're out here, we're driving this internet, and we're driving our messages in a way that they can't conceive because they aren't that smart. They still think linear pathways of communication, where in the internet, in the grassroots, we understand that the power is in radiant nonlinear scaling. And so they don't know what to do with us. So they are having to show their cards to try to shut down all of us everywhere.
Plus, I think they're prefiguring the fact that they're going to be shut down and that they are failing in their business model, because they are a monopoly supported by the government that was supported by a president who took $2 billion in donations from those very companies that he made into monopolies. That is, of course, illegal also. So if you look at and it makes me laugh because I predicted this, and now the Democrats are in the situation that they can't get records out of the Obama administration because they can't actually get to the president's library because it doesn't exist anywhere. It's in abeyance. It doesn't really exist. So the National Register can't really respond. So what did they do? They knew this. The Democrats knew this, so they hired 50 lawyers to go get the records from a place that nobody knows where they are. 50 probably Democrat lawyers went and got 200,000 pages for Kavanaugh's Supreme Court confirmation to try to stop him. So at the moment that they need the records from Obama, they just hire so many lawyers. Okay, why didn't they hire 50 lawyers to go after Imran Awan? Why didn't they hire 50 lawyers to go after John Brennan and his leaks that are on the news network that he works for as he enriches himself with what was his continuing top secret security clearance, along with James Clapper, along with Susan Rice, along with Comey, along with many of them. They are using their inside intelligence information for enrichment, and that's what was said earlier about Bruce Orr, but it's also true about these criminal intelligence officers who should know better because they signed top secret security agreements that stated that if they do this, they go to jail for a long, long time.
Well, continuing on with that tweet, censorship is a very dangerous thing and absolutely impossible to police. If you are weeding out fake news, there is nothing so fake as CNN, MSNBC, and yet I do not ask that their sick behavior be removed. I get used to it and watch it with a grain of salt or don't watch it at all.
Yeah, I think grain of salt, I think what he really meant to say was a very large bag of salt, and he doesn't watch it at all because it's disgusting and he knows it's subliminal programming. But you get used to it because what he's saying here is y'all get hypnotized if you watch it. So you get used to it, and then you just basically say, well, it's fake news, it's a lie, 97% is fake, and it's all untruth, and that's the way that it is. But I don't have anything else to watch, and I don't want to turn it off. Well, folks, turn it off. And what he means here by censorship is dangerous. That means it is criminal in this case, and dangerous because it then becomes an enemy of the state. It then becomes treacherous. It becomes seditious. It becomes simply the control mechanism of the corporate military warlord industrial manipulation of our currencies and our lives and our everything about us is all controlled through corporations in America until the presidency of Donald Trump.
Well, that was what their plan was. And if Hillary had been elected, we would not be speaking about this today. It would have all been closed up.
So he says weeding out. So what he's pointing at here, if you are weeding out fake news, then you'd have to get rid of the real fake news. No, we're using what? As he says here, it's absolutely impossible to police. Because why? The corporations have a different sense of what they think free speech is, what truth is, what the far right is, what the far left is, and what the agenda should be. So then that's what they say on the surface with all of their virtue signaling. What is really going on, direct manipulation. They're upset that there aren't wars going on, right? Why aren't we bombing more of Syria? How come we got out of Afghanistan? That war could have gone on. It's supposed to have gone on forever. How come we're not bombing people in Lebanon? How come we aren't bombing the Palestinians? Why aren't we bombing those North Koreans? Why have we stopped bombing Yemen?
Well,
these people are mad. Well, why aren't those bombs dropping? Obama dropped thousands of bombs, 200,000 bombs in the 8 years he was in office.
That's been their business model for decades and decades, this globalist military-industrial complex. By bombing countries, they're creating customers to buy the materials that they want to supply. And Reuters, as you've always pointed out, and AP, they're there to keep the bankers' narrative going so that they can continue to keep us in a state of war and fear. And it's game over. Too many people are woke now, Thomas.
Yeah, and when he calls it sick behavior, that goes against the Communications Decency Act, Section 230, that they are violating. And so what he's warning them, and he's warning them because he's a good guy and he's honest, that he's going to squish them. But he always warns people before he squishes them. So they could get smart, but they're not going to because, as you said, it's all vested. They have every one of these big globalists has everything vested. Everything is on the line. And if they can't stop Trump,
they lose it all.
They lose it all.
And they're very close. Now, the third part of that long tweet is too many voices are being destroyed, some good and some bad. And that cannot be allowed to happen. Who is making the choices? Because I can already tell you that there are too many mistakes are being made. Let everybody participate, good and bad, and we will all just have to figure it out.
There is the law. Let everybody participate, good and bad, and we'll just have to figure it out. And if it's so bad, then we need to take down things like Facebook if they become so evil. Or we need to take down Google's ability to be accessed by everyone. We need to turn it into a public utility where there's no surveillance on it. We need to stop YouTube demonetization and basically discrimination, as he's pointing out. So he's saying, who is making the choices? They are wrong choices. And he's not just talking about Mr. You-know-who. He's talking about all of the hundreds of people that have been taken down.
I don't know who Mr. You-know-who is.
InfoWars.
Oh, yeah, well, any of them.
But what he's saying is, who's making those choices? He wants us to answer that because he can't quite call that out as the President of the United States. Right. That would be George Soros' money paid to the Atlantic Council, which started the Russia-phobia, and just about 2 months ago basically took over Facebook, and it's called the Digital Forensics Research Laboratory of the Atlantic Council. That would be Dmitry Alperovich, Alexandria Chalupa, and basically George Soros, who donates a huge amount of money to them. And then, of course, the huge amount of money, $1.5 billion, donated to the U.S. Digital Service, which then got turned into the Digital News Initiative, which is basically the truth ministry that is linked with all the corporations. It's not linked with the government. These things I'm telling you about are with corporations. They're not with government. So that's what he's saying. Censorship is dangerous, and who is going to police it? What he's saying is, y'all are making me have to police it. I got plenty to do on my plate, plenty to eat on my plate, and plenty to do on my list. But if I have to do this, I'll do that too. I will take over the social media because it was criminal from the beginning.
Plus, they might take down one of POTUS's favorite channels off of alternative independent media, and he ain't going to be happy when that happens. Okay, the next tweet. All of the fools that are so focused on looking only at Russia should start also looking in another direction, China. But in the end, if we are smart, tough, and well prepared, we will get along with everyone.
And so I like the word he chose, fools, because the religious definition of that is someone who's severed from the divine, and these are fools, because they are liars. It is deceitful what they're doing, and it is completely indecent. It is against decency. And he said this again and again. It's disgraceful, it's a lie, it's fake news. It's propaganda, folks. So, what is he saying to them? That he is smart, that he's tough, and that he couldn't be well prepared because he went into these trade deals with China and others having to carry the dead weight of the previous past presidents and the asleep at the wheel Congress. So what is he saying is, after all these initial deals are done, he will be well prepared, and it is going to rocket in the future for American greatness and success. And all they need to do is back off and give him the chance to be smart and tough. If they try to interfere, as they have tried again and again, oh, we have to stop Trump from these deals. No. The deals are making us more money than anybody could have ever imagined. It's beyond imagination, folks. It is beyond history. It is beyond anything that anyone could have predicted before, except for Trump himself. And most of us didn't believe it. Now what does he have? China's kowtowing to us, bowing down. So is Turkey, Iran, China, North Korea. And Iran, go ahead. Buy some oil. Sell some oil to China. I dare you. Iran, please, sell some oil to China. And China, go ahead, buy some oil from Iran while the sanctions are on them. Do you know what that's going to do to your trade deal? They will go down to zero tariffs, or we won't do any business with you.
Well, I also hear him suggesting that we all need to be paying more attention to China. Is there anything else there that we should be watching? Because I see here that there's some reports that there's a meeting perhaps that's going to be happening between Xi and Trump.
That's what I mean by he's brought them to kowtow. Xi is coming to Washington to kowtow because he's been beaten in the trade deals and he doesn't want his own people seeing him in his shame because he's a totalitarian dictator, a complete fool, as it were, in the true definition. And what they're doing now, over 1 million Muslims in the Uyghur area of China have been surveilled and locked up because of their beliefs. And they're being questioned, many of them questioned until they're dead, or they are released and then they die before they can even get to their homes in many cases. Then they're lost. People don't know where their relatives are. Over 1 million of them have gone into, that's right, re-education camps. But what are they really? They're torture camps. And they're trying to kill the Muslims as their solution to how they're going to deal with Islamic fascism. So what we have to remember is what we have been screaming since the day Trump was elected. We are at war with China. Do not believe Henry Kissinger. Do not believe the Council on Foreign Relations. Don't believe anyone except Trump. Don't even believe your eyes. When he got a $850 billion deal, how much of that panned out as we told you to watch? None of it. That's the Chinese. Made an $850 billion deal in public, and behind your back, none of it panned out. As a matter of fact, there were illegal things that they tried to slip in by adding mechanical engines to their microprocessors and so on, things like that. So Trump has caught them with FTE, with Huawei, with all of them. He's caught them, broadband Qualcomm he didn't allow to join together. The Chinese aren't pulling the wool over his eyes. He has caused them to kowtow to him.
Okay, now we're going to move on to one of our top senior executive service operatives in Washington, John Brennan. Has anyone looked at the mistakes that John Brennan made while serving as CIA director? He will go down as easily the worst in history, and since getting out, he has become nothing less than a loudmouth, partisan, political hack who cannot be trusted with the secrets to our country.
This guy, John Brennan, just came out and said that he never said that Trump was being treasonous. Yes, he did. He said it repeatedly. He's called Trump every name in the book. He's talked about private meetings with Trump. He's talked about intelligence that is still top secret. He has breached his security clearance worse than anybody maybe in history. But remember, he's in a long line of what become news pundits who are basically people who had crimes literally that they were indicted for and prosecuted, like Karl Rove. He was prosecuted and indicted twice. But he's, one of the top news commentators. How can that be? How can Ollie North, who was prosecuted, get his own show? Oh, now we see John Brennan as a what? He was the head of an intelligence agency? He has sworn contracts that he can't even speak about these things for X number of years, depending upon what level he was at. If he was at the level I was at, 20 years. So he can't go out and get a job in a corporate intelligence agency and talk about what he knew, because that would be violating his security clearance. So has he violated his security clearance? 1,000,000 times over.
Yeah, but what does it say about our intelligence agencies or private intelligence agencies that they would hire him knowing full well that they shouldn't, and he shouldn't be accepting the position? They're all crook.
They're corporate warlords. They do that on purpose. And then they're hired by banks. Look at Comey and Mueller. They're hired by hedge funds, by Lockheed, by our biggest military-industrial complex groups, by the crookedest banks, HSBC, and then they play musical chairs. They go in, they get the information, they come out, they sell it to everybody, and use their continuing contacts, continuing top-secret security clearances, and in some cases their access isn't even pulled. They still use their single sign-on to basically go in and get anything that's unmasked. That's what they were doing, and they were revealing that, as well as many other people, Susan Rice, many others. So, and why doesn't James Comey have his revoked? Now, let's talk about what Trump said. He's a loudmouth, yes. He's a partisan. Oh, he's totally Republican, but he's also totally Muslim. He's a political
totally
hack.
Republican.
Did I say Republican?
Yeah.
Democratic. I was thinking
that's
that
why
Hillary.
I'm here, folks. Betsy's here to make sure we don't slip up like that.
I was seeing him hold that Hillary coffee cup that he was so proud to carry around with him, and then the Hillary for office, the Hillary victory campaign. He was Hillary's boy.
Yeah.
So what do we say about him? What was it? Why can't we trust him? Why was he the worst in history? Because he went back and rewrote all the books in the CIA to say there was no such thing as radical Islamic terrorists. Go back and read about it, folks. He literally endorsed them and said that they were completely justified in killing people who made fun of Muhammad or in any way didn't want to be a Muslim. He literally went in and changed the books. He spent all his time writing out the ability for the CIA to even acknowledge that radical Islamic terrorism existed. Then he helped actually the CIA and others create ISIS. Don't forget that. He created ISIL, and he gave tremendous support to Al-Qaeda throughout the entire world. He helped Susan Rice, Obama, and Hillary kill 4.5 million Sudanese for oil. Let's remember, what does the CIA exist for? To protect U.S. corporations overseas. That's it. And if you thought it was for anything else, you're wrong.
So it's really corporate intelligence agency. Period. And while you're talking about this, can you speak about his relationship currently with Mueller? Do they have some kind of relationship going? Do they communicate with each other? Do they have the same agenda?
Well, I'll say something about that as soon as I mention that Brennan was responsible for the Arab Spring. You know how many people died and continue to die? You know how many 60 million refugees? I love it that the UN head of the High Counselor for Refugees says, you all are exaggerating this migrant problem and this refugee problem in Europe too much. You're just exaggerating. It's really no big deal. Okay? That was Brennan. He's the one who used the CIA to create the Arab Spring. Then he went into Syria and brought in, 5 different factions, 3 of which we were paying, 1 from the Pentagon, 1 from the CIA, 1 from the rogue CIA. And then let's not forget Brennan's part in Syria, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan. Remember, it was Brennan's CIA intelligence that helped John Kerry bring those 2,500 Iranian spies into America. I think we should ask John Brennan to tell us on CNN who they are, because he's told every other secret that he knows. So why shouldn't he tell us who it was that he literally, physically helped bring in 2,500 Iranian spies and was undoubtedly paid under the table for that? So do not think that Paul Manafort's the only person who has offshore accounts. John Podesta and Tony Podesta got the same amount of money and put it in the same offshore bank, and they didn't get prosecuted. As a matter of fact, they got shuffled off to the Southern District of New York so that their case, after they were given full immunity for everything they were questioned about, which is the very crimes of Russian collusion that Robert Mueller should have prosecuted them for, he gave them immunity for. It's friggin' unbelievable that SS Herr Mueller really thinks that we don't know what he's up to. It's absolutely pathetic. John Brennan is an enemy of the state, and that's why he works for mainstream media, because they're an enemy of the state.
And about Brennan and Mueller?
Oh, Brennan and Mueller.
Have they got anything going on here that we maybe aren't aware of?
Well, here's what happened, okay? Now, I haven't said this before, Betsy, so I'm going to go ahead and just tell it the way that it is, all right?
Well, that's why I'm here to ask the tough questions.
All right. When Hillary told the weaponized Obama administration that studies showed that her weakest point was her uranium-1 connection, which, of course, John Brennan should have stopped because it was Russian spies in America, 10 of them, that Andrew McCabe covered up for. But Andrew McCabe isn't in the counterintelligence department of the FBI, so therefore he was only there to help those 10 spies and help TENAM, the company basically directly owned by Russia that was stealing our uranium ore and refining it in our uranium refinement plants, and then ripping us off, gouging, threatening, probably killing, we don't really know how much, and ripping us off, selling it back to us in our own nuclear power plants, and then stealing it and taking it out through Windsor under another company and shipping it to, that's right,
that's Windsor,
Iran.
Canada.
Yes, with Canada, through Iran. They sold it to Iran, to Syria, to all of our enemies. And that was being covered up by Robert Mueller, Andrew McCabe at the time. For literally 10 years they covered this up, and John Brennan knew about it completely. So they had to have distance. So when Comey committed his 28 crimes of treason that we've pointed out, John Brennan was so upset that Comey got in early on the deal that he started 3 different bogus attempts, none of which worked out for him to be able to get a FISA warrant. So he just opened in July of 2016 his own illegal CIA counterintelligence operation against an election. Oh, against the candidate that he didn't like, by the way. And then he used, and he literally, we know from Nunes, there was no intelligence that he had to do that. And then we found out that, it was a telephone call that he was told about that said that there was a PP video on Trump circulating in Europe. So he spent hundreds of thousands of dollars sending every person he could into Europe to look for that. So we're talking about 3 or 4 or 5 attempts that nobody's really gone into that John Brennan did to try to outdo Comey to get rid of that Trump long before the election. And that's who John Brennan really is. Now, there was an argument going on because Comey had gotten himself so deep after he had announced that Hillary was innocent, he knew that was the end of his career. So they set him up, and he perjured himself 3 times in testimony so that he could plea bargain down to a lesser crime when all of his other crimes came out. We already told everybody that.
It's just perjury. Insane.
But then in the end...
Commit treason, but settle on perjury.
But now he has immunity. So he doesn't get even perjury charges.
Okay.
That's the reason Comey
Keep going.
So Comey, when he saw that he was being exposed, that stepped up John Brennan's activity. Remember, the day after, Peter Strzok, with the help of Andrew McCabe and Comey and the whole Comey bunk buddies, which is that whole group we've named, and working with the interagency group that was led by Peter Strzok, with the CIA's help, all illegal. Then the very next day that group exonerated Hillary, though she was not named in the mid-year exam matter. It was never an investigation. She was never examined. They never looked at the evidence, and they didn't even look at Huma's evidence, which they found out later. They just ignored that laptop. 700,000 more. All the missing 33,000 emails were in Huma's computer. So, and the FBI has all of that, okay? So what was happening? Brennan thought that Comey was screwing up so bad that he stuck his neck out and started the Crossfire Hurricane official investigation without any intelligence, which was 100% illegal, to frame George Papadopoulos, Sam Clovis, Carter Page, and others through CIA agents, Stephen Halper, and now we're seeing that a CIA FBI agent came out and said, a whistleblower, that he turned in the agency for paying Stephen Halper bogus amounts of money for work that he never did. Well, that was because that was Brennan doing the frame-up job for George Papadopoulos because he thought that Comey's frame-up of Michael Cohen, Comey's Russian dossier, Comey's Felix Sater frame-ups, his Franklin Foer Slate news agency frame-up with the Trump Tower computer, the Donald Jr. Natalie Veselnitskaya meeting in Trump Towers, wiring Trump Towers with British General Communications headquarters agreement with Robert Hannigan out of Fort Meade, Maryland, you see? So Brennan started doing those things. He started doing his own Comey setups, and he did a terrible job of it. And then he came before the testimony of Congress and lied and lied and lied. But we now know it's come back to the fact that he came and told the Gang of 8, each one of them, and Harry Reid, he told a big whopping story because he was just really getting started with this story with, I could go into the details, but anyway, he was just getting started. So Harry Reid, it's now come out that it was John Brennan who lied to Harry Reid about the dossier that basically said, yeah, go with the dossier, take it to the Senate Intelligence Committee, take it to the State Department, take it to the Department of Justice, everybody go with it. And they all did. And with Obama's direct order, he told them to go with it, and they unmasked everybody, and they allowed NSA raw material to be released to everyone because the FISA court had said the NSA raw material needed to be stopped being released because it was in fantastic domestic and international violations. So Brennan's trail may be worse than Comey's. It's just that Comey committed like 28 crimes of treason, and Brennan committed maybe 5 major crimes of treason that we know and we already have the evidence on.
Hey, but you don't know this yet because you haven't read tomorrow's Tooth News headlines. I'm putting it together now. Got an inside story on a couple that now recall having drinks in the lobby of a hotel, and Clapper was meeting with Bruce and Nellie Orr. And they saved receipts and everything. Yeah, isn't that great? So I'm putting that article in the link, you guys, if you go into the description box so you can see it. And the other thing that's new on the horizon, and I haven't drilled down on it too far yet, but Mueller is now saying that it's Papadopoulos' fault for all of this because he lied, and that kept him from getting to the Russians sooner. Okay, don't laugh too hard.
Oh my God!
They're falling apart. They don't know which way to turn.
Well, when Comey fell apart, after thinking that he could come out and, as always, just pronounce justice without any questions, without being questioned, because he then says national security or nothing's going on here, or he makes his pronouncement for the Department of Justice. The FBI makes the pronouncement for the Department of Justice. What he really didn't tell us was the truth. There was no investigation. Hillary was innocent before she was even chatted with.
You have Jeff Sessions, who's sitting in committees allowing all this stuff to go by. Sure, check in the box. Yeah, let him do it.
Oh, yes. Well, remember, Bruce Orr is Jeff Sessions' boss. So Comey, when he screwed up so bad that everybody knew he was going to go down because even the Democrats, everybody hated him, right? Especially the Democrats, and they wanted him out. They realized that was his out. So they tried to get Trump to fire him. But before they did that, that was the idea. Who do you think came up with that idea? Not Comey. He's too stupid. That was Robert Mueller's idea. Comey, I want you to get fired, and then we'll get him impeached on obstruction of justice. And so what did he do? Comey did everything he could do to get fired. He lied, he cheated, he quoted Trump wrong, he wouldn't tell Trump the truth, he'd never answer whether he was under investigation, he'd tell him privately yes and say publicly no. He lied so many times to get fired. So then he went to his bunk buddy, who works at the New York Times, his lawyer supposedly, and with his institutionalized leak, which literally the guy was on payroll for the FBI to be a leaker, Comey's leaker for the New York Times. He went to him to leak on purpose, as he said in his own words, to get a special counsel appointed. And Jeff Sessions was in on it, and that's when they twisted his arm and said, we have you, Jeff, on the phone talking sanctions with the Russians. And Jeff forgot that he didn't talk sanctions because he's just too old and senile. And so they got Jeff from the beginning, and because he was also part of obscuring Uranium One, okay? So when you ask this question, I got to answer. So Mueller told Comey what to do, told Comey all along, you're not working hard enough to get fired. You're not working. So when he got fired, that was the signal. He knew the special counsel would be appointed. He'd get immunity, and nobody would get any crimes because special counsel was coming in to cover up the trail of crimes, which we've seen for Bruce Orr with Lisa Page, with Peter Strzok, with Andrew McCabe. The astounding crimes covered up by the special counsel are only equal to the crimes covered up by Michael Horowitz and his fake Inspector General investigation. So Comey and Mueller have been bunk buddies, best friends forever, for longer than anyone can count, literally back to the early 70s. Early 70s, they started stealing patents with Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton and Rose Law Firm. And do you think any of the Clinton Foundation stuff that just got shipped back to Washington is going to convict Hillary? Who is conducting those investigations? Remember, there were 5. They were all closed by Andrew McCabe. Oh, Andrew McCabe had 5 investigations on him, which none of them seemed to be going anywhere, not even the leak, which was the only thing Michael Horowitz brought forward as an impropriety that needed to possibly be looked into.
And again, all these people that you just named are senior executive service, including a name that you mentioned early on, Brett Kavanaugh, which for the life of me, I cannot figure out why in the world anybody nominated him, gave that name to Trump. He and his wife were sitting thick with the Bush administration back when Bush Jr. was running the place, and he is senior executive service. So expect what you inspect and inspect what you expect, folks.